All right, folks, it's time for World Edition, and we're going to see what's going on in the world. We may have a guest coming in later on as well, but he was having some technical problems, so we'll see if those are solved or not. But there are a number of things happening in the world. Apparently, both Donald Trump and the current, some other folks that were on that list were released, and definitely it'll be interesting to see what folks have to say about that. I think both Donald Trump and Bill Clinton's names were released in the newly unsealed documents that reveal Jeffrey Einstein, Epstein's relationship with powerful people. So those documents were released, and apparently they named some A-list celebrities. But apparently that is one of the things that is going on in the news. And we do know that tomorrow will be the anniversary of the January 6th incident, and all along those lines. And the former Capitol police officer Harry Dunn has announced his bid for Congress. He says he wants to be a voice at the table, and he has announced his run, and we'll see if he gets any traction or not. So that is something else that we're seeing in the news as well. And a Iowa school shooting, that's right, we started off the year with another school shooting, has left one dead and five others injured, and that is going on as well. One person said it doesn't feel real. Students recall the terror of the Iowa school shooting that killed some folks and all along those lines. So definitely this is what folks are recalling as they are recounting their experience at Perry High School. I believe that is the name of the high school, and all along those lines. So definitely that is something else that is being reported in the news. And I believe that shooting took place on yesterday and all along those lines. And authorities have cleared out People's Park and installed shipping containers as barricades. So that is taking place there in California. We've got some of our California people with us as well. So some folks are wondering whether the Trump's border wall in Berkeley and whether the shipping containers will keep people from stopping their protests. And apparently, Biden is to focus on Trump in a speech near Valley Forge, marking 3 years since the January 6th incident, and Biden marks that, or at least planning to mark it, with warnings on Democratic threats. So that is something else that we're hearing as well. And while that's going on, the Trump campaign has turned its fire on to Nikki Haley to blunt her rise in the polls, because apparently she's getting a little bit of traction, even though Mr. Trump has a substantial lead and all along those ways. And apparently there's a group of folks that are still trying to get him off the ballot. Ironically, it's not in anything but liberal states, but apparently Illinois and Massachusetts voters are seeking to take Trump off the 2024 ballot. So if that happens, then that would be four states that he would be off of. But like I said, a lot of these states are the more liberal states and all along those lines. So it'll be definitely interesting to see what happens. And the New York City mayor is suing Texas charter bus company that has been transporting migrants. So it looks like he's going to sue that particular charter company and along those lines. And DeSantis attacked Trump on abortion while ignoring Haley at a CNN town hall. So that is something else that we're seeing in the news. And, apparently there is some very sad news coming out of New York. There was a subway trains that collided in Manhattan, causing a derailment and all along those lines. So at least 24 were injured after the New York City subway trains collided, and there has been service disruptions that are expected through this particular morning and all along those lines. And there is some news about Trump's money that he's gotten from foreign individuals. So Trump's business took in nearly 8 million from foreign governments, according to House Democrats. So Trump businesses received millions from foreign entities during his presidency, according to a House report. So that is something else that we're seeing in the news. I'll get to some world issues, then I'll bring in the panel, see what they've got going on as well. But apparently, Blade Runner Oscar Pistorius has been released from South Africa prison after serving certain sentences for the murdering of his girlfriend. So he was released on parole, and we'll see whether he can stay out of trouble now that he's been released on parole after having served a number of years. I'm actually seeing conflicting reports. One of the stories says 9 years, the other says 11 years. So I'm not sure which is the correct one, but maybe when Jeff or Rick come on, they can tell me which one is the correct time, since I'm seeing different time frames and all along those lines. An Islamic State group claims responsibility for Iran suicide bombing, killing at least 84 people. So definitely China's Xi has sent his condolences to Iran after a serious terror attack. So that is something else that we're seeing in the news. And North Korea has fired artillery shells toward the South Korea's border island. So South Korea and U.S. militaries are holding joint firing exercises, and this is something else that is going on in the world. And while that's going on, Blinken is heading into the Middle East as Israel says it will change its military tactics in Gaza. So this is something else that is going on, as some people are concerned about a spreading of that particular conflict, particularly when the U.S. airstrike just recently killed a leader of Iranian-backed militia in Baghdad. So a self-defense strike in Iraq killed the terrorist leader in that particular incident. And India has intercepted a hijacked Liberian flagged vessel in the Arabian Sea, according to their navy. So definitely there was some Houthi-style attacks on the ships off of the Somalia coast and all along those lines. And last but not least, it does look like that Japan earthquake has cast a cloud over the push to restart nuclear plants in that particular part of the world as well. And last but not least, it looks like Russia hit Ukraine with North Korean missiles and seeks Iran's help in that particular conflict as well. So it does look like at the beginning of the year, we've still got lots of conflicts, lots of turmoil, and lots of other things going on in the world and all along those lines. So definitely it'll be interesting to see what's going on. I do see I've got my guest on, so I'm going to bring him on and see what he's got to say about a number of things. And they will also be talking about his research and all along those lines. So I do have Jim North with me, and he's done some research on the Osage tribe and some of the things that they found out and all along those lines. So apparently they were given some wealth, and we'll find out more about that from Mr. North. So I'll bring in Mr. North and all along those lines. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing great, Mark. It's great to see you again.
Thanks. It's good to see you again as well. I know you've been on before, but if you'll share, and then we'll get to my other panelists as well, a little bit about this Osage tribe, and I'm probably mispronouncing their name, but what they're all about, and some of the things that you found out in these narratives. And you are an award-winning journalist, so if you want to share a little bit about yourself as well.
Sure. It's pronounced Osage. And, I live in Oklahoma, and the Osage Nation is in Oklahoma. But their story is one of the great plot twists in American history, really. It's incredible. And I think for many Oklahomans, you live here all your life and you really don't realize the history. But there are 39 federally recognized Indian nations within the state of Oklahoma right now. And that's quite remarkable. And there's 500 something in the US. And so the thing is that, originally, before this was a state, Oklahoma, it was called Indian Territory because these tribes were exiled here. They each have their removal stories of how they got here.
Right.
Some came from California, Alabama, Indiana, just all over the country. They were sentenced here, basically. This was going to be their land. So, they became the richest people in the world overnight.
And a couple of things that you said that I was curious about, and definitely I'd love to hear how they became the richest. And like I said, we'll bring in some of our other panelists as well shortly and everything. But one of the things I was curious about is I know that it is not always easy to get recognition. So you're talking about the Osage people and how they are recognized, and those many countries that are recognized. But here in North Carolina, there are 2 tribes that have been fighting for recognition. I actually have some family members that claim to be members of those tribes and claim that more than they do their African-American heritage, and all along those lines, that being the Halawa. And I also have some friends that are members of the Lumberton tribe as well. But I just wanted your take on how long it takes, on how that goes about.
Yeah. As far as can I give you the background of the Osage? Is that what you're after here?
Yes, please.
Okay. And by the way, can I ask you? I mean, you said you're Native American. In which tribe?
As I said, my family members are actually, we claim more of the Cherokee. It's actually Cherokee and African American background, but I have some family members that claim to be Halawa, and Halawa is one of those tribes that isn't always recognized. They've been fighting for recognition, as have the tribe of the Lumbees there in southern North Carolina as well. So that's one of the questions I was asking you about how easy to get recognition, because I think those family members, because we claim to be a mixture of many things and all, but primarily many of us claim our African American heritage, but we acknowledge our Native American part of our heritage. So most of what we acknowledge is the Cherokee part.
Okay. Well, sorry that I didn't entirely comprehend what you said. But, yeah, the Osage started out in Pennsylvania as far as back as 400 to 500 BC, and they were removed westward beyond the Mississippi around the turn of the 19th century. And so they made a treaty with the U.S. government, and they settled around St. Louis and the Cahokia Mounds. And their homelands, instead of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, became Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, wasn't Oklahoma then, and Kansas. So then with treaties of 1808, 1818, 1825, and 1839, they had to cede those lands and be removed entirely to Kansas. And by 1873, they realized the U.S., the settlers and the government realized, hey, Kansas is good farmland. We want that. And so another treaty, 1873, and they were removed from Kansas. And so then their shrinking land became an opportunity to find their own land. And so they sent out their people and threw spears in the air. And if the spear sunk into the ground, they would realize, hey, this is good farmland. We don't want this land because they'll take it from us. So when they found the Osage Reservation, the spears wouldn't stick there. It was undesirable land. Nobody wanted it until 1898, when oil was discovered. And then the land run, the Oklahoma land run, was earlier than that. But the thing is, oil precipitated statehood for Oklahoma, and that happened in 1907. So I don't know. Maybe I'm in a roundabout way here getting to what you want to know, but I thought it was important to establish the fact that they were moved around until they bought their own land in Oklahoma, and that was 1.65 million acres with their own money, and it should have been theirs forever. But the land run and treaties and so forth broke up their land. And then I don't know, I'll let you go ahead and ask me something else.
No, that was the questions I was curious about. Now, you did say that they had found some land as well and all along those lines, and got this oil. So how was the oil discovered, and were they able to keep the oil? Because I do know a number of even our modern Indian tribes have made quite a bit of money off of the casinos that they also own. So I'd love to hear the story about how they were able to keep the land, or if they've still got the oil rights even to this day.
Yeah. Well, the significant factors there were in 1887. Now, I'm picking up at 1873 when they were excommunicated from Kansas. They bought their own land. By 1887, there was the Dawes Act, which by the U.S. government was designed really to break up this Osage land. So it's divided into 160 acre parcels. And so what happened was they're trying to create a surplus and get some of this land back, the government was. And so by 1906, they did this again, trying to get back some of this land. But the Osage were the wiser and said, hey, you know what? No matter what happens here, we're going to retain the mineral rights. And so that was written in to these legislative acts. And then once they discovered oil, then of course they were the richest people overnight. Now, there's $1 million elm tree that still exists in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, where these head rights were sold. Now, have you seen Killers of the Flower Moon yet?
Not yet. That's what I was going to ask you about, was Killers of the Flower Moon, which I know stars De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone as well. So I was wondering how that came about and how they were able to discover this story.
Yeah, it's historically accurate, and I'd highly recommend seeing. And it's 3 hours and 22 minutes. But hundreds of murders took place in Indian Territory, Oklahoma by this time, 1907, because settlers wanted this land from the Osage. So all you had to do really is marry an Osage woman, kill the woman, you got the land. So this was happening on a wide scale, and these auctions were taking place in Pawhuska for $1 million, $2 million per 160-acre tract. So it's even said that Henry Ford and got in a fist fight with one of the oil barons out here in Oklahoma, and the lawn by the $1 million elm tree.
Oh, wow. Now, Jim, just along those same lines, were the Osage involved in one of the things that many people that know Native American history are familiar with, which is the Trail of Tears? And if so, how were they involved in that? Because I do know that there was a number of people that were relocated from one part of the country to the other, and that is infamously known as the Trail of Tears and everything. But I'm just wondering whether they were involved in that, and if so, how?
Yeah, it was a factor, because in 1839, roughly, is when the Cherokee were one of the final tribes removed to Indian Territory. But by the time in 1839 that the Cherokee came out to Indian Territory, the Osage were already there. So this created a huge conflict. And that's why there had to be another treaty to remove the Osage to Kansas, is so that the Cherokee could live there. And so, but eventually the Cherokee didn't want that land either, and they sold it to the U.S. government. The U.S. government sold it to the Osage, and they eventually came back.
Now, did the Osage still own this land? Because I know that one of the things we oftentimes talk about, even to this day, is some of the other countries around the world that have oil. I mean, that's part of the whole Middle Eastern conflict and all along those lines. So do they? But I know there's also oil in Alaska, and some people say that we're not tapping into enough of our own U.S. resources in that oil sense. But do the Osage still own the oil rights, and is there still oil on that land, just like I know there's oil in Texas and other parts of the country as well?
There is. I don't know all of the details and ramifications of that, but yes, they do still own their land, and it does still produce. But they were so rich that they were buying Pierce Arrow cars with the money. And the odd thing is that the car dealers wouldn't tell the Osage at the time that all you had to do is put more gas in it. This was told to me by a tribal elder. And so they would just go buy a new car.
Oh, wow. They just go buy a new car and all along those lines, everything. So that's very fascinating, everything in that space. Now, I noticed that part of your own work has been, and I definitely want to bring in our guests, and they may have some thoughts as well, has been this notion of unsung heroes wearing no caps. And I know that it does contain this story, but it contains other stories as well. So if you just share a little bit about that particular book and how a lot of times those heroes are not the ones that get reported in the news media, because sometimes they aren't always getting the recognition, either because they don't want it or because of the fact that sometimes the media doesn't cover it as much as it should. But I just wondering your notion of this unsung heroes wearing no capes.
Yeah. I'll show you the book. There it is. Unsung Heroes Wear No Capes, 12 Essential Virtues for an Extraordinary Life. And Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, he endorsed it on the front. There's what he had to say about it. It's a very meaningful book for me to write. It took 2 years. There's an unsung hero story in every single chapter, because a lot of the things we do, we don't always get the credit for, and that's okay. We have to be okay with that. The main thing is to make contributions to other lives, and whether you get the credit for that or not. I have Native American removal stories in this. I also have the Black Wall Street story in this. The Osage story is not in this, but I did quite a bit of extensive journalistic work on it. That's why I'm well versed in it. But the 12 essential virtues, and you could call them values or anything like that, but honesty, courage, optimism, hope, things like that.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense and everything. So those are some great virtues. I know that one of my co-hosts and one person that here, he said that was going to be his goal for this year was honesty and all along those lines. I'm going to bring him in because I know that definitely Jatovy had talked about honesty being a virtue that he was going to extol in the year 2024 and all in that space. And he is definitely involved in the gaming community, but we were asking about things that we would like to see done in 2024 and all along those lines. And I know that honesty was something that Jatovy put out there, and both he and I are here in Durham. And I do know that one of the people that apparently you have done some, at least spoke on a symposium that is named after him, is John Hope Franklin. So as a historian, I just wanted your thoughts around John Hope Franklin, because I do know that you spoke at a symposium that was named after him in Tulsa. But I don't know if you ever had the chance or the pleasure of meeting Mr. Franklin when he was living. Jim.
No. Yeah. Are you asking me that?
Yeah, I'm asking you, Jim. Yes.
Yeah, I have not met him. But yes, I have spoken at that event a few times, and it's a very meaningful event for sure.
Yep, he definitely has some historical reputations and all along those lines. I've got the other folks that are here as well. And Jatovy, you got any thoughts about this Indian removal? We were talking about that briefly, and its maybe even historical consequences, and also your notion about honesty, because I do know that that is a virtue that you said you were going to extol even more this particular year and everything. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, because that's one of the 12. He did mention honesty, and I think there are 8 other ones, and he may get to those as well.
First off, welcome, Jim. Hopefully we'll have a great lively discussion, and I appreciate your work in the area that especially dealing with Indigenous people and the situation that they have gone through.
Thank you.
That's something in terms of honesty, that's something that our society kind of glosses over and doesn't want to discuss because of, I guess, because of the atrocities that have taken place during that removal process. For example, dealing with the Keystone Pipeline, and even way back in history, going all the way back to the Trail of Tears and so on and so forth. In your view, how can we break that wall of, I guess, that blockade that happens where we want to whitewash history and the things that have taken place? How do we get through that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It is the challenge of the day, is it not? It's something that we all need to be conscious of and aware of. And I think maybe it's that we do this, one day at a time, one act at a time. I know for myself, once I learned these stories, I wanted to make these stories my own. So I'm not ashamed to talk about it. And we have to talk about it, And the Native Americans I know and the African Americans that I know through the work that I've done, just the most amazing, wonderful people. And I don't know any of them that would not appreciate someone understanding their story. So I think when you understand someone's story and you can identify with it and connect to it, they appreciate it, you know? So I think we have to do it, and it has to be consistent as far as modeling to other people that, hey, we do know this history. Doesn't mean we're stuck, you know.
Mhm.
It's actually a freedom to understand
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah, definitely agree with you on that. I see Rick got his hand up, and I'll get to him as well and everything. But one of the questions I was curious about: have you been following it at all? Because we've been talking about it on the network to some degree, the DEI controversy and the DEI conversation. And as a professor, what is your own thoughts around that? Because there's been a lot of conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We know what happened at Harvard and a number of other places. But I was just wondering your take on that and whether the academic fields need to be doing more work in that, or your own thoughts. Jim.
Oh, for me.
Yeah.
I know I am here on the campus of the University of Oklahoma in Norman, and we're pretty strong on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there are a lot of things that go on here, and I think there's been a really good focus on bridging divides. Our university was involved with the 100-year centennial of the Black Wall Street Tulsa Race Massacre. This is out in the forefront. I mean, and in fact, we had a presidential dream course that was on Greenwood and the Black Wall Street story of the Tulsa Race Massacre. This was 1 or 2 years ago. So I was involved with that as well. So people are unashamed, and that's a good thing. You know, I attended 100-year race massacre.
Yeah.
And that was a meaningful event.
Rick, you had a question for
Well, I
Mr.
just
Norton?
wanted to say, as a Jew, I'm well aware of the dimensions of Hitler's Holocaust, where in 6 years he murdered 11 million people that he didn't like. But we've had 2 Holocausts in the U.S.
Yeah.
We've had the Native American Holocaust, and so Hitler only had 6 years to do all his murdering. But for us to kind of mess with the Native Americans, we had many centuries. And then we had the slave Holocaust, where they had 2.5 centuries to, commit atrocities. And, looking into the future with AI, we're looking at a whole different kind of Holocaust as within a couple decades, we'll start building thinking, feeling machines who won't be treated very well. And also human consciousness will be devalued as AI bubbles up. So we're always doing a lot of killing.
Yes. That's a really good point, and I appreciate you framing it that way, as far as the Holocaust in the U.S., because that's what they were.
Jim, you had a question? You're on mute.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah. First off, I want to congratulate you on the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I wanted to stress, excuse me, the Osage people lived, for thousands of years. You said 500 BC, and I had read 700 BC, but it doesn't matter. It was there for a long, long time along the Ohio River originally. And there were wars between the Iroquois and the Osage. And so, but they were considered remarkably tall and tremendous warriors. And, but they had hunted buffalo and had developed agriculture, and they had existed for so long. And then the Europeans came over and drove them away and further away. And you'd write a treaty and tear up the treaty and move them again. And so this is a horror story in my mind. And I congratulate you for helping to tell it. And, you mentioned up to, I think, 1907, but even along with the Tulsa massacre, there were other horrors in the 1920s as well. And I just wanted to say, along with Rick's point, how long we have mistreated people that had lived there for thousands of years and had been developed, had spiritual, cultural, economic security. Yeah, sure, they were warlike too, You know, nobody's making them saints. But you know, the idea that we can understand the history and along with the diversity and the DIAE type of interesting things is how do you make amends to those people? And this is we just were on a show where the word affirmative action was saying it's just like affirmative action, and now affirmative action has become a bad word, a bad phrase. So what do we do to say, hey, look, you know, it's not, we're trying to make a level playing field for people, and some people that we disadvantaged horrendously. And how do we get it to a level playing field? And it's a very complicated issue, but we're stuck with people on extremes saying, oh, okay, this is, you know, tough luck, you know, everybody wins. There's winners and losers, tough luck. And we were saying, you know, on the other hand, that we have to make recompense, financial recompense. And we don't talk to each other. We don't understand each other. And we're unable to change each other's minds about this. So I don't know if information is the answer, education is the answer. And I wanted to know your thinking about that.
Well, yeah, and let me preface that with what I'm going to say with the fact that even though statehood occurred in 1907, this Osage reign of terror, although it was spread further apart, but 1920 to 1924 was
Yes.
a concentrated number of years where these murders took place. 1921 is when Black Street occurred, the Tulsa Race Massacre, and these locations are only 45 minutes apart. So you had burning down a district of Tulsa, African Americans, leveling it to the ground. At the same time, you have this Osage reign of terror going on 45 minutes away. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
As far as the solution for something like this, I don't know. I felt like it was important to write this book because it's about character. I mean, this is terrible character that was personified. There's just no excuse for that kind of, we all know on this call, it's inexcusable behavior. It's so inhumane. It's shame. It's blush-worthy, cringe-worthy, anything else you can say. You know, our Jewish friend here, he knows the extermination of a people group, the attempted extermination was beyond the pale. And so are these stories in the U.S. I don't know all the solutions. I really don't.
Hey, Jim, along those same lines, and then I know other folks may have questions or follow-up questions as well, but two things were crossing my mind. One is, do you think that it is what they went through is still relevant in the 21st century? Because it does seem like there are some folks that are concerned around gentrification, which many people would say is another form of displacement, similar to what the Native Americans went through, and all along those lines. So can you see a parallel between what happened then and what is happening now? And then also, do you see a parallel in other parts of the country? Because I've heard people that have literally used the Native American situation as a parallel to what is going on in Gaza and Palestine. But I was just wondering your thoughts around some of these potential parallels.
Well, if we don't understand history and we're prone to repeat. And I think we, as maybe has been mentioned already by someone else here, we do have these problems today around the world in various contexts because unfortunately we really don't learn the lessons as we should. And if we don't, it will happen again somewhere. So, you know, I mean, there's people that say we don't have problems in the U.S. like we used to. Well, yeah, we do. Better in some ways, yeah, but a long way to go, yeah. And I think it's why we really have to get this character thing down. And I'm not trying to overemphasize my book, for my book's sake. But the concepts in it are so important. I tackled things like courage and faithfulness, mercy, growth, things like that. It's really not what we do for ourselves in life that counts. Why is it that it's 100% always what you do for someone else that makes? So that's why I feel like, what kind of view do you have on your vehicle when you're driving down the road? You have mirrors all over, you have this and that to help you see 360. That's the kind of view we need in our life. And if we can't embrace the stories of these other people, we won't be able to help them.
Yeah, I think that Jacoby had a question, as did Rick, and everything along those lines. I did see their hands risen, and I did have one of our producers ask, because we do have a Pod TV store that has folks' books located that have been guests in the past, and I have not yet added your book, but it will be added before the course of the day, and about probably before noon. So if folks want to get that book that you're talking about, we will definitely have it on our bookstore, and I might even also try to get the movie that you were referring on there as well. So definitely that will be available. So definitely wanted to just bring that up and everything. But Jacoby, you had a question.
How do you feel that TV shows such as Lovecraft Country that covered the Tulsa Massacre and did a kind of a rendition of what could have taken place, or
And
Watchmen, who also did a cover of the Tulsa Massacre, or even Marvel just released episode 6 of What If, was a different take on if the Indians were to, or if the Native Americans were to push back the colonization because they had a particular power. It was actually an interesting story, and I recommend everybody watch that as well. But either way, how do you feel that TV shows, movies, and their portrayals of these atrocities play in our psyche and our understanding of this, of the things that happened in our history?
What I hope is that people care. I think these are a good job representing the event and the concepts of what happened in order to avert future disasters. I commend and applaud those that are producing these shows. I know the Killers of the Flower Moon is historically accurate because there were only 3 people ever convicted of hundreds of murders of the Osage. 3. And further, the Tulsa Race Massacre, why is it that we don't know how many who died? They didn't even have the dignity to count the lives lost. And even on a broader scale, American slavery, why don't we know the numbers of deaths? Because it was buried. So what I hope for with these shows is that people care about it. There's been some good representation, I think, and I haven't seen the one you're talking about.
There's also some shows featuring Native Americans that aren't total bummers. Reservation Dogs is a lot of fun. Prey, which is the latest installation in the Predator series, and I think the least crappy one. It's a good movie, and it is set 200 years, 300 before the modern Predator movies with Schwarzenegger, which were pretty dumb. Prey stars Native Americans fighting aliens, and it's a lot of fun, and it's very well done. But in America, you're never more than a couple miles away from either a modern atrocity or an old massacre. My hometown, Boulder, Colorado, I think was built just a few miles away from the Sand Hill Massacre. Mm-hmm. And a mile away from my childhood home, we had a mass shooting at a supermarket. And right now we're in the middle of a grandma genocide. COVID has killed 1.5 million Americans. with 80% of those people being 65 or older, 1 in 40 seniors killed by America's government politicizing and botching COVID. So,
well, along those same lines, Jim, just I was wondering your thoughts and if you've got any around the migrant situation, because we do know that some of the migrants are also part of the Native society from Latin America and all along those lines. And there are some people, including some that are of certain party affiliations, that will claim that it is all that the natives have got their just rewards by the casinos that they have gotten. And I alluded to that earlier and everything, because there are a number of Indian tribes that have casinos, including some here in North Carolina, like the Cherokee and a number of others. So I was wondering your take on that, because I've heard some political folks that have made that argument that everything's better now that the natives have their casinos that they own and some other businesses that they own as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I've got some thoughts around it, but I'd love to hear my guest thoughts instead.
Is this to me, Mark?
Yes, it is to you, Jim.
Well, I think that whatever little movements toward the Native Americans or African Americans, is good, but will it ever be what it was? You can create new, but you can't really store the old. It's like, here's a concept. What a person has the irreverence to destroy, for some reason, they don't have the ability to help rebuild something that they were the perpetrator of. So, for example, Black Wall Street, Greenwood, Tulsa, it's nothing like what it used to be. Has there been movement and progress? Yes. And has there been, I think the expansion for Black Americans have been professional and academic and entrepreneurial and things like that. That's wonderful. And that's what we need to look toward. Native Americans, same thing. Is it going to be restored to what it was before? No, because what people have the irreverence to destroy, they can't get back. But you can do new things. You can do new things to help facilitate change by making contributions toward them. People have the uncanny ability to affect their own change with contributions that are made toward them. So in other words, I can never change a life myself, but I can make a contribution and help someone change their own life. So that's what I think what we're responsible for, is being sure that people have the ability to succeed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, this is actually a question for Jacoby and Rick, and then I see Jacoby, your hands up and everything. But one of the things that we heard a conversation around just in general is this notion of, do you have to be of the tribe or of the ethnicity to portray the ethnicity? Because I do know that there was some criticism around folks that were not Native American that were portraying Native American lives and all along those lines. As I said on this show before, they were that mini series around the gentleman that was the Bass Reeves, the gentleman that was the sheriff, and I believe that was in Oklahoma and all along those lines. But there have been other portrayals, because even he himself may be the originator of the Lone Ranger character, is what I've been told, because he had a Native American friend and definitely had some of the other characters that were part of the Lone Ranger narrative, but that wasn't necessarily palatable toward the mass public and everything. So they created the Lone Ranger that we know more famously and all along those lines. But I just wondering your take on whether people can portray outside of their race, and also if that should be something that should be done, or should they try to do as much as possible to get people that are of their own ethnicity to portray themselves. Jacoby or Rick, since y'all are in the acting field, or even Jim, if you want to tackle that.
I just, it seems like one of many considerations, and it's important, but the most important thing is to make stuff that people will watch and that isn't garbage. And it's only been in the last 10 years that we've seen non-ridiculous portrayals of Native Americans for the most part. Reservation Dogs shows it's about a group of Native American slackers having ridiculous adventures, and it's really fun, and it normalizes the lives of Native Americans.
Yeah. Mark, are you trying to say in terms of offering positions to people of that tribe being able to, or of that tribe or of that ethnicity, to be able to portray those individuals there? Because
exactly.
For example, there was a movie way back when which caused a lot of controversy for Scarlett Johansson, when there was a movie called Ghost in the Shell. It was a live action version of a very, very popular Japanese anime. Well, saying Japanese anime is redundant because most anime is done from Japan, or Japanese animation is the actual term. But Danhua is Chinese animation, by the way. I'm a big nerd. But there was a big controversy around that. So, I mean, I agree that, for example, if it is based around Native Americans, yes, Native Americans should be the predominant individuals, being the main characters and so on and so forth, due to the fact of our history around removing, having blackface, to having different characters play different roles because the movie would sell. For example, I think it was Steven Spielberg who did Red Tails, and it was a big thing because it was the first African-American leads that sold in a big money-making movie or blockbuster movie that had mostly Black African-American faces in there. So in terms of, and I applaud Michelle Yeoh and those that are doing a lot with not only the Chinese Americans, but the Japanese Americans, and as well as those in those countries and dealing with those cultures, because they understand that culture more. So I guess to answer your question in a long-winded way, I applaud those that, if it's set around Native Americans, just what they did with Prey, utilizing those of that culture, because it gives them opportunities more so than those who always get opportunities. And that was always our history. So yeah, I applaud those that give opportunities that those in the cultures that it's surrounding.
Yeah, it goes down to a question of character again, Mark. I think, are we going to be sensitive? And are we able to be considerate of other people, portraying them in a way that is reasonable? They used to say that, well, there were no other actors, so we had to have a white person playing all these different roles. Well, that's nonsense now. If it wasn't nonsense then. But the idea is if you can make a movie and find character actors that are of the race, the ethnicity that you're trying to portray, then do so. Just be sensitive to it. Don't put in a substitute and try to pass it off, because we used to be ignorant as a society when it comes to these things. So we saw a picture on the screen and we believed it. I mean, wasn't it an F Troop that had a tribe of Indians, Native Americans that were the Hakawis or something like that? It was like they stopped someplace and they said, "We're the Hakawi," and so now we're the Hakawis. And so, this kind of silliness was funny to me as a child, but we have to be more sensitive if we want to have any kind of character as a country.
There's a certain measure of demographic justice happening in America, in that by about 2040, white people will be less than 50% of the population. And it's prompted all this racist backlash from right-wingy a-holes to fight for for white privilege. But America is changing, and by 2040, white people will be under 50%. Latino people will be in the range of 30%. Black people are at about 12% now. I don't know how those percentages are changing, but it's better for the country when you look at how freaking vicious, racist white people are at clawing to hold on to, their position.
Ill-gotten gains.
In a similar way, which is, I guess, one of the most cringe things for me to hear, which in discussions, and Jim, I would love to hear your take on it, because one of the things that I cringe to hear when individuals, especially in discussions around the tough discussions around race and our history and so on and so forth, dealing with Native Americans to African Americans, one of the things that people say is, why can't you get over the history, or why can't you get over the slavery, or why can't you get over this idea? Yet in the background, they have a Confederate flag waving around that they're supportive of. So that's one of the most cringe things to me, is that you're telling me to get over this, but yet you're supporting something where they literally fought to keep me in chains. So Jim, in your view, how do you approach conversations around that, where there's a complete contradiction and the cognitive dissonance is on complete display, but you're in that discussion and they're not listening when you're having that discussion?
Yeah, well, it's hypocrisy. There's no question. We're not short of that.
Oh, I forgot there are two Jims.
Oh, I'm sorry. Terribly sorry. Jim, please.
It's okay.
I can
Maybe
wait.
that's you, Mr. North.
Well, both of you guys can answer, but yeah.
He meant Jim, not James.
Yeah, the dissonance is a great way to say it, right? And truly, that is a sentence that you said that, people say, "Can't you get over it?" That is true. I mean, that happens all the time. People pull that card and say, why should I care? I mean, can't you guys get over it? Well, that person doesn't even know what they're trying to get over yet, right? I mean, they don't want to hear it. They don't understand it. And therefore they tell you, why are you so stuck? I think that we have to find new ways to say these things, make them applicable, make them relevant, and, convey to people why they should care.
Yep. Jim, I don't know if you want to.
The apathy and the indifference is the biggest enemy.
There's a racist war that went on that quickly ended because there's money in it ending, and that's the war against mixed race hookups. And like it's crazy, like it used to be, mixed race marriage used to be illegal and would get you in all sorts of legal and other kinds of trouble across much of America. And that like very rapidly evaporated because there's money in it evaporating. Because if you put a mixed race couple in a TV commercial, that lets you hit two demographics, each racial demographic, and it makes you look modern. So it's crazy how thoroughly, laws against miscegenation, is that how you say it? Went away, and then the sentiment. And it's great. I think it's great that people can see people of, all different races being worthy of being horny for.
Well, it wasn't that long ago where people of different races couldn't see someone like them on TV. So they had no one to identify with. And this is one of the things that so many people felt like role models. And some people said, I'm an athlete, I'm not a role model. And this was a hard thing for some people to get their hands over. But the fact is that somebody could see, like Serena Williams playing tennis and winning and being a champion. And that was so inspirational to them because they had no such images that they could be that sort of person, that they could be a winner at life. And this is one of the things that the EAT Foundation has done, is so you give people a little bit of hope. And who knows how far they can go with that hope. But if you take that hope away, we know what the outcome is.
We have a
But
mini
Jim,
genocide that's been going on for a long time against trans people, and it's only a mini genocide because trans people are, roughly 1% of the population. So, I mean, it's deadly and dangerous often to be trans, but with positive portrayals and just seeing trans people, in the media, that helps normalize trans people and reduces, I would hope, violence against them.
Yeah, representation matters. I mean, simply put, the more women see themselves in particular areas, women begin to achieve those areas or reach for those areas because they can see opportunity in those areas. If you don't see opportunity in the place that you want to go, then why even try to go there? But I mean, oh, go for it.
No, we see this kind of hypocrisy in all sorts, and it's our political leadership that's really we can't stress enough how broken the system is. We see this now with an abortion. The GOP was all for states' rights, and then when they found out that states like Kansas were accepting abortion and putting it into their state constitution, they said, "Oh, we got to have federal mandates," and so now they're pushing for that. So it's not. And, we saw it with the Supreme Court appointees. They blocked someone from Obama because they said they should let the voters decide. And then at the very end of the Trump administration, they rushed in an appointment to the Supreme Court. So Trump, arguably the worst president of our time, got 3 Supreme Court appointments. Now the Supreme Court has been politicized. So we don't trust in our institutions anymore the way that they have. We had that trust in the past, rightly or wrongly. So this is a breakdown in society. And how do we repair our society? By building trust in each other. And how do we do that? By communicating with one another, listening to one another, and understanding that your experience might be different from mine. And that what was good for me might not be good for you. And what's good for you may not be good for me. And the only thing we have in common is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Now here's going to that trust aspect, and this is and Jim, not James. This is a good question. This is a question that always again bubbles in my mind. So dealing with building trust within not only society and our groups themselves, in our I guess collective groups themselves. For example, there are leaders within the Black community that the Black community respects and looks towards. However, outside of the African American community, there are people that see individuals and prop them up in positions of power to say, hey, this is who you should listen to, just because they speak in a way that I feel the Black community should be, because they're not monolithic. They're this and that and the other thing. For example, there are a lot of individuals that prop up Thomas Sowell that are outside of the Black community. The Black community doesn't see Thomas Sowell in this high regard as other communities may see him. But for some odd reason, the individuals outside of the community don't respect the individuals that the Black community sees as those leaders that they appreciate. At a time, MLK Jr. wasn't seen as a good leader for the Black community. They propped up others. Muhammad Ali, the individuals that stood on stage from Jim Brown to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to Ali and everything, that signed the paperwork and actually fought against going to the Vietnam War and all these other things. And the Black community saw these individuals as leaders, but outside of the community, people saw others and wanted to prop them and put them in positions of power. For example, there's a big push for, from Thomas Sowell, Larry Elder to Clarence Thomas,
Candace Owens.
Yeah. And Jonathan Whitlock, individuals that the Black community doesn't really even respect because of what they're preaching. And I know this happens in other communities as well, where people in positions of power take individuals that have a face and say, this is who you should listen to, even though that community doesn't really respect that individual. Who is that in the Native American community, for example, that the community itself respects, that we should honestly start listening to and trying to respect ourselves, even though we're outside of the community.
That's a great point.
Well, I think that we have to begin to think in terms of, with a great football team. Now, true confession here, I'm a Michigan Wolverine, okay?
Oh, lucky you.
So here's my point about that. I can't believe I'm bringing this.
Go for it. All right.
Who would have thought?
Own it. Own it.
I thought I was going to say the name Jim Harbaugh today, but I am.
Wow.
Uh-oh.
To his, the team, they've adopted an attitude, a nameless. How do I say this? Nameless, faceless defense. In other words, there's no heroes on the defense. It's the collective that gives them their power, so to speak. So they're better together than if they had one or two great heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the way we have to approach this. Because, at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to be the famous person that makes a difference.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I think it's when you and I have a powerful enough voice that it overrides who we are personally, because the message has resonance. So I think that we need to, as someone said a minute ago, own it, that we own our own voice and the power of what we know and believe. Because at the end of the day, it's not my name, it's not my face, it's what we have to say and what we have to contribute that makes the most difference. And I think it's going to be the collective of us and not the individuality.
A really cool thing about that episode that I was trying to tell, that I had mentioned before, the episode 6 of What If in season 2, that is actually part of the message that they said, because the focus from the colonizers was the individual, and the focus from the Native American people was the collective. So it was great to hear you even saying that, because that's part of the message of that show.
Yeah. And John Stewart had to
kill got to get ready to wrap up and everything. It's been a great conversation, Jim. I know you've been on before. Hopefully you'll make a return, and we've already added the book to the bookstore, so hopefully folks will be going to get that book and all along those lines. So Unsung Heroes Wear No Capes and all along those lines. The other thing that I was going to add, which can be interesting as we wrap up, is that sometimes, and I think Jacoby, you kind of alluded to it, we can be our own worst enemies in some sense and everything, because we do know that even in that interracial conversation we were talking about, that sometimes it is our own communities that sometimes are more frustrated by us dating outside of our race than the other community is, and all along those lines. So sometimes our own community can be the one, and I know that's even happening in the Native American cultures as well sometimes. So sometimes that can be part of the dialogue as well, and that can be an interesting thing that happens, unfortunately, and everything.
And Jim, thank you for your work.
I have to say thank you to each of you. I just thoroughly enjoyed what you all had to say. So I just want to thank you for it. It really was meaningful and valuable things that you shared. So thank you for it.
I appreciate it. And if you just want to tell folks one more time about the title of the book, and like I said, it will be on our Amazon bookstore, on Pod TV, TV books and everything, or Pod TV books, but definitely if you will share how they can, a little bit about the title of that book and what that book is all about, and then we'll get on out of here.
Okay. A person can see a description of it, jimbnorth.com, JIMBNORTH, jimbnorth.com. The links to Barnes & Noble, the links to Amazon, Walmart even. Unsung Heroes Wear No Capes, 12 Essential Virtues for an Extraordinary Life, but it will come up with Unsung Heroes Wear No Capes, or a person can just go to my website. But Also has, a subtitle of Exhortations to Excellence. It's how we really should raise the level in every area.
Well, like I said, definitely appreciate you being on. We're going to get on out of here. The regular panelists had some great questions. I hope you enjoyed some of mine as well. And we'll be back next week with more great guests and more great conversations about what's going on in the world. I know right now, Ukraine, Russia, and China, our show that Sasha hosts is going on. We've got some other shows coming up, including one around interior designing, also from California, because I know that both Rick and Jim woke up early this morning from California, and Jeanette doesn't have to wake up as early because her show
Yeah, I'm
doesn't.
going back to bed. I'm not.
My time, which is 11.
It's my time for my first nap of the day.
Sounds good.
Go for my Wolverines Monday.
All right. Y'all have a good one, and
Bye,
we'll see
guys.
you later.
Bye.
Thank you.